All right, we're watching losers finals of SE Zidane, or Zidane as it should be pronounced. I didn't realize I just played my first games on TTN for the Doomy Memorial, and I didn't realize we had changed the graphics for Elemental, including on TTA, to show all possible things that could symbolize an element. I think that is a reasonable way to do it. My instinct would go different directions on how to graphically portray this, but it makes it clearer what each element is. This is to say, I don't play with Elemental much. I know I'm way behind on this change happening, or evidently I'm way behind. But that's what I'm noticing here. So Cookie is first turn. Um, there is no plus wall on, and I will bring up the stips in another window. I just saw this game was happening, and I thought, ooh, I'll jump on. I didn't like prepare or anything. Um, so yeah, this is losers finals. The winner will play Kaus Debonair in the finals. They will have to beat him twice to win the tournament. Notably, Kaus knocked out both of these players. Cookie was knocked out in the third round, and Zoom was knocked out in winners finals. Let's look at their path to get here. Cookie beat Sachi, then Franco, then lost to Kaus Debonair. But when he returned in the losers bracket, he then beat Slash of Time and who else? Why are you reloading on me? Don't you hate it when pages decide? No, I'm gonna put you back to the top of the page. Why would that must be on my end? Anyway, um, Cookie beat Slash, then beat Addy to earn their spot for an icon, having gone 4-1. Then beats her Smokes to go 5-1, still just a quarterfinal icon because of how double elimination brackets work. Beat Vid to go 6-1 and is now facing Zoom. Zoom, on the other hand, stayed in winner's bracket longer, beating Sleeping Ninja, Dalamar, Akiyama, and Vid to go 4-0 before losing in losers finals to Kaus. So it's 4-1, which put them in this match. So Cookie is 6-1, Zoom is 4-1, but because Zoom was able to delay their loss in the tournament longer, they had to play fewer rounds. Staying in winner's bracket is a very valuable thing to do. I've always thought Zoom is an exceptional closed player. I played a series of closed games against him a long time ago. Cookie, I think, is just very competent across all formats. Something Turds has often said about Cookie. I mean, competent in a really positive way. This is like me with food. Like, someone gives me food, and I'll be like, this is edible, and they'll be insulted. And what I mean by edible is it's quite good. I don't find a lot of food that tasty. This is good, but I don't say it well. When I say competent across all formats, I mean, very good professional level of play across all formats kind of thing. Not that there is professional at this. Turds has regularly pointed out that Cookie is particularly good at handling elementals, playing in such a way as to leave useful pluses open for later. And we do notice that Cookie has started with a card that has an element. I would expect his hand to be filled with elements, but is not an element that was on the board, so using it does not come with, cost of missing a chance. Zoom, I am not that familiar with in non-random closed games, but in random closed games, at the start of the return, I made some videos about some closed games we played where he just like was, giving lessons every game to me essentially. I have a friend who is a chess player who's quite rude, and when he beats people, he will go like, "Where's my money? Pay me for the free lesson I just gave you." And I feel like Zoom was giving me some free lessons. I mean, it wasn't a free lesson; you got to pay me, that kind of thing. Uh, so what is going on? It's hard to talk about closed games. I don't have a ton to say. Oh, I was going to bring up the stips. Yeah. Or I won't have much to say till later. Cookie has thrown out a multi-directional card that doesn't give much indication of the hand. It seems very plausible that he's playing one balanced card in four corners, but let's look at what the rules are. Must use 4 level 9s, level 9 and 10. So this was one of the level 9s. Max of 2 cards with an A, not the level 10. No rares, semis allowed. So most likely we have, we're going to have 3 more level 9s, 1 level 10. Probably all with elements on them, which means if you've built your hand, you should keep track of all the potential cards with elements your opponent might use. It's going to narrow down the amounts quite substantially. Level 10s tend not to have that many elements, but level 9s, which have a lot more things like summons, like the card we see here, are much more likely to have elements on them, and thus you can put some effort into keeping track what are likely cards they might run. There are more on level 9, so that might be too much to keep track of, but that's something I think you want to do if you're playing this tournament format. I also think a 5 starter makes some sense without plus wall. It's much harder to have a corner you can support, and building things for your own sames and pluses makes a lot of sense. At the same time, lacking plus wall tends to favor second turn, especially compared to normal. That doesn't necessarily mean second turn is an advantage, but where first turn is traditionally a pretty huge advantage in closed. In random first turn trade, I kept track of 300 games at some point. Just any trade games that happened, no adjustment for strength of player. I figured over 300 games that would balance out. It was approximately 50% first turn wins, 25% ties, 25% second turn wins. So if you're only counting wins and losses, first turn won 2/3 of the decisive games. If you're counting ties as a split result, then first turn scored 62.5%. Either way, very large advantage for first turn, and bigger in closed than it is in open. However, here, without plus wall, those were games with all non elemental rules in effect. Um, Games without plus wall tend to look much more balanced. All right, so we see our first card from Zoom. Note, it also has an element on it. It is also an element that is not on the board, so using a card that potentially doesn't have use on the board. We have 5 different elements on the board, so there's a very good chance if you have elemental cards in your hand that they'll have some way to connect with the board if you have a variety of elements. They probably both have potential plus ones, probably both have multiple, because it looks like both are taking advantage of elementals, something I'm not always so good at doing. And we see a card. Remember, there's no plus wall, and there's only 2 cards that can have 10s. So having that 9 facing towards a square might be even better if it was facing towards an elemental square. That's potentially tough to take, right? Because you only have 2 10s in your hand. And so if your 10s happen to be up down, you're not hitting that, right? If your 10s aren't opposites and happen to be upright or, down right, again, you're not capturing that card so easily unless you've set up a same or a plus. But on a rule set like this, where it's not necessarily easy to figure out what numbers your opponent's going to be on, with 10s missing, maybe it's going to be a massive 9s, but maybe it's going to be cards like what Cookie played and a massive lower numbers. That seems unlikely. I like the card Zoom chose here more than I like the card we've seen from Cookie. I think if you're not going to have 10s, 9s become powerful. And I think something like 8667 thrives on having plus wall potential against 10 9s and 8s. Now, it may be that Cookie just picked one card of that type because it's a nice card for setting up his other cards. But my instinct here, all right, we see our first 10 from Cookie, and notably, it's a 10 to the left. I think there is virtually 0% chance that Cookie has 2 10s to the left. So he is either conceding 8 or he happens to have a plus there. Now, if Cookie is going opposite cards, I think actually a very plausible card for Cookie's hand is A944. With same wall on, it combines pretty well with the 449A. The 4s go nicely together. People who like one of a card often like to run more. I also know that card has an element on it. Eden does not. So if you're going to use cards like that, if you're going to use Eden, wouldn't you rather use Salamander and A944? Doesn't that seem just like better because it has an element on it? So if you're going to use Eden, Salamander should be even higher on your preference ordering, and it seems like that should be a card that is in his hand, and it's a natural fit with Eden. So I would currently, if I'm Zoom, be predicting A944 in Cookie's hand. But that tells me something else. One, either Cookie has forgotten plus wall is not on. This is not impossible. He didn't put the game up. Cookie has not been the most organized with this tournament. Or two, this is a plan starter in 5 that sets up pluses or sames in 2 and 6. If that's the case, then Cookie likely also had set up opportunities with Salamander in 7 after his starter. And if that's the case, Salamander has a 9 to the right in 7, and he will have other cards in his hand that can plus that number. For instance, something like a 6993. Now, I don't think there's really natural fits here for cards that have both 2 and 6 on levels 9 and 10 that don't include 10s on them. It would be hard to, just in my head think through all the possible cards, but it seems difficult to have the same card for 2 and 6, but also like you've probably built your hand to be able to do that. I can't think off the top of my head what that card would be again with plus wall off, but if you're Zoom, you might be wanting to look through all the available cards right now and figure that out. I will not be doing so because, I don't have to play this game. So I don't have to put in that level of effort. But I think there's some information because Cookie used up a card that would be useful to have for 8, and notably also at a plus and 4, right? 449A is a plus and 4, and potentially the only capture in 8. So this is a fairly high value card to hold on to, which really makes me think it is a planned setup for the hand, right? The standard thing hands do that start in 5, when the opponent goes in one corner, you go in the opposite corner with one of your big setups. I didn't see how long this game took in card select. I know Zoom makes his hands in advance. I know Cookie has done some card selecting. I'm not sure how prepared he was. And depending on how prepared I think he was, I would play quite differently if I'm Zoom here. My instinct is to go 4. I think that's kind of the standard thing to do here is go 4. You might easily have a card that fits nicely with your 2998, something like a Bahamut, a A862, something where there's a little combo potential back and forth due to the E, but it kind of clicks nicely. All right, he goes 2. Okay, this is very logical. That it was a card that fit nicely in 4. He did have a card, but this is also just almost safe. Now, if you have this card in your hand, you probably have something sort of an opposite. And maybe that opposite card in 8 would have made sense, because that would actually be safe, and this isn't safe. Now, if Cookie has Salamander, as I would guess he does, then he won't have a 10 to the right. He won't have that capture. But if he doesn't have Salamander, the next most likely thing is something with a 10 to the right. People tend to like opposites. So there is some chance Cookie can take that. He might not want to take it now, and if he can take it, wouldn't his card probably be an opposite of Eden? So a card for 3 and a card for 7. If it is an opposite of Eden, and he holds it on for the end, the most likely two squares left at the end are 1 and 4. And it's a card that has his only capture in 1, but is unlikely to have much down power facing 4. So actually, this might be a difficult card to take. Regardless, what I think Zoom is saying is after the move in 5 and his move in 7, he has a lot of combo potential, so that if this is ever taken, he can always just combo back through 5. I like the idea of forcing your opponent to capture things. So my instinct would have been, if you're going to use this card, put it in 4. But I might just be wrong here, because a really important thing with no plus wall is just 10s increase in value, right? 10s are just really hard to take. And if you do my move in 4, I think Zoom didn't have anything for 2. So if you do my move in 4, there's no way 2's getting occupied after you go 4. Either 6, 1, or 8 is being occupied, most likely 6 or 8. And I would think most likely 8. All right. Cookie showing really major disinterest in elements, and Zoom also potentially skipping an elemental chance. Zoom has gone with virtually opposites in his 2 cards, so I would really strongly expect him to also have cards for 7 and 3, and also have them close to opposites. I think there's a very good chance one is an A9 and the other is a 9-9, much like we've seen. 2998 was Zoom's level 10, so he does have only level 9s remaining. Standard thing to do is go in 1, but 1 is quite scary. If your opponent goes in 9, you can just frequently just be lost on the spot. And as long as they have the capture in 8, they're probably always going to have captures in 4. But the other thing to do is to slide and say, I have the combo back, and specifically having that 10 out facing, I really like this way of playing it, right? If Cookie takes the free square in 9 or the supposedly free, Zoom has some kind of combo in 4, and that means Zoom will have cards in 1, 2, uh, 4, 5, or sorry, in 2, 4, 5, 7, 8. Cookie would need a double capture. That's pretty unlikely to be had. On the other hand, if you do have a way of doing this, it's better to do it in 4 than in 8. It's better to do it near your other card first. If you can slide in 4 and then combo in 8, that is the more effective way to do this. And the reason is that way, if they flip your card in 2, you get to combo that back at the end through 5. This way, if they flip your card in 8, you combo it back, but you don't combo 6 back, so that if they take 2 at the end, you're down an extra card. I was right about Salamander. I don't know if that's what that card's actually called, but it's Salamander in my head, A944. So good read on my part. And now, I also wanted to say, I played this type of closed game a bunch versus Cookie, getting a Q and sliding. And if sometimes it just loses to moves in 1 rather than 9. The square you can get a forced loss against is 1, and Cookie is very good at finding those. So I assume he didn't have it. Now we've seen 4 cards from Cookie's hand. We've seen 2 balanced cards and 2 opposite corners. I have no idea what his final card is. We know it doesn't have a 10, but there is no obvious direction. I would think it's more likely to be side to side than up down, given where power in the rest of the hand was, which means it might not have a lot of play against 4, but 4 does have an element on it. It can't have a 10, so it has no innate capture of Shinra. Zoom has to go in 4. If he goes in 1, he just loses, because 4 will capture 7. Or you can't assume it won't. So you have to go 4 here. If you walk into a combo, you lose. I don't know how securely he takes back, but it's a lot harder to walk into a combo without plus wall on. Oh, and he has the beautiful same here, going up 6-4. So I think he's probably won. 5-7, 8-7, if Cookie had that in his hand again, in 1 would win for Cookie. But I think Zoom is winning this game. And I am wrong. Cookie wins again. Good God. Yeah. Yeah. All in mentality, anything can happen. Yeah. I think Zoom played this really well. If we look back at the game from Zoom's perspective, he saw a starter and he played a move in 7 that gave him this beautiful same in 4. And it also, let's assume his last card gave him something in 8. Based on what we've seen, 932A was the only recapture in 8. But let's assume he had something else, something that fit nice. Something like 6993 or whatever. Maybe not. He doesn't need it. He probably had a corner card for 1 as his last card. Cookie goes in 3, and Zoom goes, okay. I'm gonna... I wanted him to go 4, but he had such a good card for 4, he left that for later. I think that's smart. He goes in 2 with close to safety. Cookie goes for the Q, and it's pretty dangerous to go 1 at the end there, I think, because 9 can just beat you on the spot, or you have to be in a guessing game. He does the slide move, setting up his perfect same, and just gets really unlucky. It happens to walk into the last card. I really like how Zoom played this game. From Cookie's perspective, I'm a little confused. He played in 5, followed by 3. Now, if we look at Cookie's hand, his remaining cards were 5-7, 8-7, 9-8, 9-3, and A9-4-4. He actually just doesn't have a recapture from 2, right? He just didn't give himself that recapture at all. Now, maybe it's unlikely that kind of thing gets taken. Maybe you can bluff like this, but he didn't have that recapture at all. What's more, he didn't have 8 at all, right? He gave up his play in 8, and he didn't have a recapture in 2. I know some people like to do this. I think sometimes it plays out such that it doesn't hurt you like this game. I really don't like that way of playing. Then Zoom goes in 2. And this is part of the reason I wanted Zoom to go in 4. I think it makes sense he didn't because I didn't realize he had such a perfect card for 4 that he didn't want to occupy it. But if you look at 4 there, in fact, Cookie would have had no capture in 8, and he couldn't have captured the card in 4. Um, so I tend to hold. Oh, I guess he could have because of the -1. I couldn't see that in Sigurd's beautiful hair for a sec. So yeah, I don't get Cookie's move in 3. I think Cookie's a very good player, but I don't think this is a good move. After Zoom goes in 2, Cookie goes in 6. He leaves himself 9-8-9-3, which is a good chance of sweeping the left, and A9-4-4 has the better chance of sweeping the bottom right, but it's not a very comfortable card. If Zoom goes in 1 there, Cookie can take it, but he has no left power, so Zoom will go in 8 and tie, and Cookie doesn't have a setup in 9. So I think Zoom would have tied there with a move in 1, the other standard plan. Again, I don't like 8 as much as 4. Once you're in that queue, if you're going to do the slide strategy, you want to be able to slide in 4, not 8. And that maybe means the move in 2 wasn't right. But of course, you can't plan for everything, and Zoom gave himself a very good chance here. Cookie correctly then gets rid of his useless card in 9, and he leaves himself with 9-8-9-3, which means he has secured himself a tie. Because we know. Well, has he secured himself a tie? If Zoom had played a 10 up there, then he hadn't. But it's very low odds Zoom has a 10 up. I think very low odds there. And the 9-8-9-3, due to the elemental, can capture, or the plus, can capture anything 9 and down. So Cookie did secure himself a tie at the end, but that's because the move in 3 happened not to be punished. And you could say, well, Zoom didn't exploit it, but Zoom couldn't know to exploit it. And you could say, well, if he couldn't know to exploit it, why is it bad? It's bad because all of Closed is playing the odds, and I think this is the wrong way to play the odds. So congrats to Cookie making the finals. Yeah. Um, Cookie says got a bit lucky. I think did get very lucky. I think Cookie's last few moves were good, and I think Cookie is very good at handling this kind of strategy. I play the sliding strategy not all the time because I don't play that much, but when I play Closed, regularly play this kind of game versus Cookie, and I think he's one of the best players at handling it, figuring out how to play those last 3 moves. Here it was pretty simple. You stick the fire thing in 9, but when there's a forced win in 1, he reliably finds it. He's very good at these setups. And so I think not a coincidence he played the endgame well, and that he kept a good card for the endgame, the 9-8-9-3. But I don't like the move in 3 at all, and I think the one thing from Zoom's perspective, I'm not sure where he should have gone and moved 4th. That seems like the critical move. I don't know what his last card was. There's also a case for going in 1 instead of 8 after the queue is set up. But that's so weird to do because we don't know if he had 8. If you don't have 8, you can't go in 1, right? And I don't know his last card. If you're not going to play 9, 7, 2, 8, and 9 because then you don't have 4. No, I think Zoom's moving 8, depending on his last card, but very likely, unless the last card is exactly 6-9-9-3, I think the move in 8 has to be correct. And then we can again quibble about the move in 2, because if you didn't have the right order to slide, that's not really where you want the card. You'd rather slide elsewhere. But no, I think Zoom played really well. I think this is a closed game, and Cookie played a few good moves, but I think Zoom got unlucky here. Yeah. Anyways, congrats to Cookie in a finals against Kaus Debonair. This feels like a finals that should have happened in like 2004, and it's happening in 2023. That's pretty cool. They've played before in the tournament, and Kaus won. I believe Cookie is 2-1 against Kaus lifetime in tournaments. He will have to beat Kaus twice to get there. I do think it's kind of fitting that Cookie is the player here because Kaus did beat Zoom twice. Once Kaus broke Stips, but then he beat him again. And I think it will be cool if he beats, sort of both these players twice. But Really nice runs by both players here. Again, I think Zoom's a technician in closed. I think he's really good, and I think he played really well here. And I am less convinced by Cookie's play, but obviously Cookie is now 7-1 on this run, including beating great closed players. You have better games and worse games. Yeah. And there are lots of good closed players who play these kind of bluff moves in three. I just don't believe in them. So hey, I did some coverage of the Zidane. That's great. Great news.